I don't know how much of the last set you want to keep.
I'll figure that out
Okay.
afterwards.
Do you want something to tie that to this?
I'm just going to treat this as a separate, like, let's say that was like episode 1. This is like part 2 or whatever. I don't know how much I can use from the first one, not because it's bad, but because
it's not conversational.
It's one, it's not conversational, but 2, you go on all the tangents everywhere, and some people can't keep up with the tangent. I can.
No. Yeah.
What would you say is like the biggest thing that you learned in Afghanistan, in the Marines, something that, like, other than, you know, your knee getting blown out in boot camp, like the biggest lesson that you kept with you throughout your life?
Don't try to overcalculate something before you try to be a part of the solution. Because just like with avocados, the timing is impossible. If you wait for the perfect time, you'll miss it. So I think just being able to say, this is good enough and I am good enough for the job, but I'm going to act, rather than somebody who might be more qualified but is incapable of action.
There's a quote that I don't remember. I don't remember any of the quotes I know, but I don't believe in luck. I believe in preparation.
And you know, the funnier thing is, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
And at that point, it's not even luck. It's just like
the preparation.
It's just prepared coincidences.
Yeah. No, I definitely believe in that. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of training harder than the thing you're going to do, so that when it's time to do the thing, that's easy.
What do you think about people who don't want to prepare, who don't want to push themselves? Is it just an idle mind is the devil's workshop?
It's not even that. It's just the fact that if people don't want to do work to get successful, and they're content to do the bare minimum, they shouldn't ask for any kind of respect. Like, I can't respect that. Yeah. Like, why am I going to give any kind of kudos to someone who's doing the bare minimum?
You can do one really, really good move in jiu-jitsu, but if you can't do every other move right, then that one move can be perfect, but you still lost. You won the battle, but you lost the war.
This happens all the time. People will get their first cool car, and you'll cherish it, and you'll think it's awesome, but it's not the only car out there. You're going to think it's the best car in the world because your exposure is what it is, and you chose it for your reasons. But if you sit there and you actually like do the numbers and you're like, is my car a high performer? You know, there's so many metrics we need to measure things by. But when I think about people who are trying to be successful in an endeavor, how much did you put into this endeavor, and what level are you trying to aim for? I think most people believe that they're going to go for the professional level, and they end up as like glorified, passionate hobbyists at best.
Yeah. Would that be because a lot of people put a lot of judgment into what they are, and then when they get a material thing, they use that as a milestone in their development, even though that physical thing isn't exactly a reflection of who they are. It's just a reflection of what they can do.
Yes, and I'll add, I think that with most people's idea of perception being reality, they think that if they surround themselves with the veneer of what they want, that the perception will be that they have it. And Khalil Gibran wrote the book of The Prophet. In the book, he talks about dentistry, over 100 and something years ago. Not a great thing to think about. But he talks about how poor people would have a rotten tooth and have it removed, but now they have a hole in their mouth. And the wealthy people would put a gold cap on the tooth. Now, other people walking around might see the person with the gold cap in their mouth and be like, oh, that person's wealthy. But what they don't understand is underneath that gold is still a rotting tooth. And they see the poor person with missing teeth and they're like, oh, well, look at this poor person. But they don't have any future problems waiting for them. And it's really simple to get tripped up in that. So especially within the realm of like influencers in the modern day, I'm not going to deny that that is a pathway to some people making a career for themselves. But now you just have so many people thinking they can do it too. And just because you have access to a little bit of tech, a camera, and the internet does not mean what you have is content and worth sharing. So putting in the work is important. What do you want to share? What do you want to show? And that matters. And if you didn't put substance behind it, I think you're selling an empty product.
Yeah, and a lot of the people that you see on the internet, it's almost like a pyramid scheme. It's like one person becomes successful, then they share their tips to get successful, and then they bring more people who then say, "Hey, this is how you get this successful." And the only people who actually have any worth are those who are successful not on social media but on other platforms, on other accounts. Like, Alex Hormozy, he's CEO of acquisition.com. It's a company that makes other companies better. And his main or the biggest thing about him is that he didn't really get on social media until they hit like $100 million net worth. And it's like he built himself outside of something. He doesn't tell people how to run their lives. He tells them how to scale, how to build businesses. And it's like, well, he has the background for it. Then you go on like the biggest influencers on the internet and they have like these cool cars. They have this like grandiose lifestyle, the coolest chick in their car. And it's like, is that success or is that just perception of success?
Perception of success. But it's kind of like when I was getting into the dietary science world and I was thinking, I'm going to be a nutritionist. I'm going to help people. I'm going to make them change their lives. And the number one thing is people want a look, not the health. And if you look at the cover of Men's Health magazine, that person is unhealthy. Every month. I don't care who it is. Hugh Jackman was on the cover, unhealthy. Because who gets put on the cover? The people with like 4% body fat, the people that look shredded. Is that something you can keep 365 days a year?
No.
Why not?
Your body's not supposed to do that.
Your body's not supposed to do that at all.
Yeah.
I know that there are going to be some ladies that'll listen to this and they'll think about the unfair and unreasonable beauty standards that we put on women. There's just a slightly different, but still really relevant discussion to be had about men's health and the perception that we put on what a man should look like. And it's unfair. It's still unfair. Perception sucks.
Would you say a lot of the beauty standards is not so much the physical beauty, but more of the confidence that person has of who they are?
That's how I use it.
Well, yeah, but we're both.
I need a checkup from the neck up. But the difference is I walk into a room and it's my room, right? So it depends on what people are interested in. Some people do find strong personalities attractive. Other people are very vain and it really is just the looks. But I mean, if it's really about the looks, we might be onto something with the divorce rate because I'll tell you what doesn't last forever.
Yeah, looks.
I've always thought about the content being the most important thing, which is why having good conversation, having the ability to say you're reliable, you have things that you bring to the table. You're not just a pretty face.
What would you say about women, from the male perspective, women who use their beauty as the means to get what they want and not so much the brains or the actual like getting what they want because of merit or whatever, or like people who they look beautiful and therefore men want to give to them. They want to be able to help provide for them.
If an analogous component to that solution is present and they find each other, have fun. Doesn't bother me. That's the whole concept of like water finds its lowest point. Water finds its lowest point. What I'm trying to get at is that might not be for me, but it'll work itself out because there is someone for that person.
There's a market for everything.
I might not agree with it. It might not be a societal norm currently. It's definitely feeling like one, especially as we look at what we usually look at, which are celebrities and people of power and people that are constantly in the news. We see them surrounded with beautiful people. So we think, oh, that must be the thing. Let's be honest. We know way more average people who are 6s and 7s that are together with other 6s and 7s having a great and beautiful life. And some of those people, I have actual severe jealousy over how they live. And then when I see like some super beautiful couple, celebrity, so-and-so, I'm not jealous. Good on them, but that's them. And, a part of what they do in that lifestyle is a part of the putting out the looks. So I don't know how much you know about Pierce Brosnan, the actor. He played James Bond in the mid to late 90s and a little bit into the early 2000s. And he married a very beautiful woman. And I'm blanking on her name now, but there was a famous quote that happened when someone was asking him about his wife and how over the years she has put on a little bit of weight. And, he still takes her to red carpet events. He's still with her. And in Hollywood, that's usually not the case. Usually, once someone has passed their prime in beauty, people mosey in different directions. Oh, what do you know? Pierce Brosnan is still with his wife. And when someone was asking him, I don't know whether they meant it in a snarky way, but they were like, why are you still with her? And he's like, that's the mother of my children, who I love and I have loved, regardless of her beauty. And I plan to be with her the rest of my life because that's who I am. She put on a little bit of weight. She's still the woman I love. And I think that needs to be more of a story than it is. And the problem is, It's the other way around. It's usually like the Zendayas and the Tom Hollands of the world. And it's like, does every couple have to look like that? That's impossible.
But it's also, that's what sells. That's what people view because their own insecurities. Like, hey, I need to see someone who's better than me. And it's like, now I feel better about my position of not being so perceived as beautiful, even though they probably are. They just don't see it.
And that's why I think Bruce Willis was such a good action star in the 80s and 90s, because he looked like every other dude. You know, like, I can be Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
I'm like an everyday kind of guy.
Is that somewhat different between men and women, that women look more for the beauty and men just want to be kind of not as out there? Because I know that, like, earlier today you were talking about how like men in their 30s are more attractive and women in their 20s are more attractive, and that.
Let me take attractive out of it. Let's just talk about the value. I'm going to start by saying what most men are attracted to in their 20s is fleeting. Like, it's hard because as a cisgendered male, I'm speaking from one perspective and there are many. If
It's the most liberal thing I've ever heard you say.
If I had one of my buddies here who could speak from another perspective, we could talk differently. But from at least the cisgender male perspective that I have from my limited time on this planet Earth, I can say with a decent amount of certainty that men in their 20s who are interested in women in their 20s are wasting a lot of their own time and their quarry's time too, because by and large, the sense of finding a soulmate is not the key in your 20s. It's a whole lot of go out there and see the world and experiment and don't get too tied down. And you don't see a lot of like young couples getting married, tying the knot and making it. You do see a lot of people playing the game and playing the field, and then a lot of hearts get broken. And
does that have to do with like hookup culture?
It does, to a degree, but I think that that's such a small portion of it too. I just think that by and large, we haven't grown into the people we're going to be yet when we're in our 20s. Nobody in their 30s looks at their 20-year-old self and goes, "Yup, nailed it." And if you did, congratulations. You probably didn't make it very far. Now, if you're still caught up on like the looks part of it, looks are fleeting. When you get to the substance of the matter, like what can you give each other? Do you actually, carry the other person's deficits well? Can you shoulder the burden of X, right? And when I see the couples that know how to work and they last, it makes sense because they were never in it based on the looks. They were thinking of like the execution and application of what each party brings to the table. If I were to ask you, what do you look for in another person? It's probably not looks first.
Well, I know I'm already ugly. It can't go any lower than that. I mean, obviously, there's the way that they hold themselves, the way that their composure is, the way that they hold their eyes. Like people who can't keep eye contact, that's obviously going to be like, okay, you have some confidence issues. That not that we can't go through that. It's just that like there's this baseline. If you're not at that level, it's going to be really hard to get you higher than that. But for the most part, I mean, as long as they don't look atrociously ugly, I'm fine. Like, it doesn't really matter to me. Of course, because I'm not like a big tattoo fan. Obviously, I have my own built-in tattoo. It came with my owner's manual. But for the most part, it's like, do I want someone who, I mean, why did you get tattoos?
So for me, art is more than just like some subjectively cool thing. It's an identifying function for me. Like every one of my tattoos is personal and it holds some weight. And because of me living a fairly vagrant lifestyle until I came to Northern Virginia in my late 20s, I got really used to living out of either the back of my truck or a few small bags and never really having things once I left New York. And so the idea of like always having something that is a part of me with me wherever I go, more than just a memory of it, it's body art. And I stress tattooing as body art first and foremost. If you're doing it because you're thinking of the perception of you having it, don't do it. You should never commit to something that is as painful as tattooing if you're not ready for it. And I can say this as somebody who has had several tattoos and has gone through tattoo removal as well. I got a tattoo on my back that I went through 5 sessions of removal on. It takes a lot to say, I want this on my body forever. It takes another kind of person to say, I messed up. And then the removal, although is 100 times quicker, is about 30 times more painful.
Is that kind of like life?
I think that way too, because I was married once and I think about the love that I got from that relationship, and it was definitely worse on the breakup. I wouldn't say everything because only Sith deal in absolutes. But by and large, the negative side of most things usually outweighs the good, usually. And I think that's a part of what makes us kind of jump from like dopamine fix to dopamine fix to dopamine fix, because we really do just want to have a good day. And I think that goes back to our baseline model of lazy by nature, creatures of habit. We're seeking the comfort. We're seeking the joy of not having to work hard so that we can all live a Wall-E existence floating on chairs being fat. But the real part of it is we got to do the work, and we've got to make the happiness come to us through our efforts, not just through thoughts and prayers.
So it's almost like you could be 90% right, but that 10% is going to hurt the most of being wrong. But that's where you grow the most. You don't remember the 90% that you did the maintenance or the way that you grew. You do the 10% that you failed, and you don't want to do that again.
Yes, which is why most adults don't find hobbies in their later years until it's way too late. And then they're older people who then get into knitting or pottery or something crazy. And it's like, you could have been doing that your whole life. No one told you you couldn't. There was just some social constraint based on like, what do you mean you're 20 and you want to learn how to knit? No 20-year-old learns how to knit. It's like, man, I think that's awesome. You learn any skill well and you carry with you the rest of your life, you have something that you could sell because you're probably going to have the reps to be good at that thing. We're so busy trying to worry about chasing a bank account number or a certain amount of like material possessions to surround ourselves with, to have that veneer, that golden tooth, and we're rotten at our core. And instead it's like, build your character, fix your deficits, remove the toxic traits in your behaviors. How about this? Identify the toxic traits in your behavior. Try to remove them. Try to be a better person. Read a book, drink some water, hug your mother. Like, it's not hard. When I see people who just refuse to give common customs and courtesies to strangers, the toxic trait I have is that I judge that person based on that. I know I shouldn't. You're entitled to treat strangers however you want within a certain legal right. But when I see people who are just absolutely nasty people, and you don't know me, I'm just in the grocery store. I'm just in the way of your life for whatever reason. You want to get nasty with me and you don't know me. And it's like, I would love it if like, I was a role player in the saving of Nate Yakubishin in Afghanistan. He lost his leg after stepping on a device and our corpsman froze. And the corpsman is the medic. And so me, Bukema, Rickard, we jump on, Quashin, and we're all doing some kind of work, whether it's in placing a second tourniquet, treating him for shock, everything. And we got him saved. I would love it if like some long distant relative of his was like in the supermarket with me and like, yeah, you're in my way. And I'm like, well, I wasn't in the way when it was my time to step up and do this work. Like, you don't know what I've done.
Yeah, but you didn't do that because you thought you would get recognition. You did it because it was the right thing to do.
Correct. But you don't know me. You don't know anything I've done. You don't know if I'm a good person or not. You just want to be rude. Now, is it wrong of me to think that you're just a scummy person who's mean and nasty? That's my baseline. I don't get to know the better part of you that dresses up for church and puts 20 in the collection plate. I don't get to know that person. You just showed me the person you are to a complete stranger, and I'm going to judge you on that. That's my toxic trait. Now, I'm the kind of person that when I'm at, whatever grocery store and they say, would you like to give $1 for kids in school to have a lunch? And I'm like, yep, I'll put in $5. Because for me,
you were that kid.
I was that kid. And so, I take small pride in knowing that I'm giving back in that one small way that'll make me feel like I'm balancing the scales in my head. And there are people that live absolutely scummy lives and they have no scales. And they're just like, going to keep being a scumbag.
Yeah. What was it like life when you were getting your food stamps and you're converting that and everything?
Oh, man. I remember my first tattoo was supposed to be the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Not because I'm patriotic, but because that was the picture depicted on the back of the $1 food stamp. And I wanted to remember my roots. And when I tell that to some people, they're like, oh my God, that's dark. And I'm like, no, that's real. And I hate that the rawness of it affects you that way. Because if it affects you in the way that makes you feel like, oh, that's terrible, go help out an impoverished family. Do a food drive. Like whenever I see Toys for Tots, I'm not mad at Toys for Tots. And I know the Marines play a big role in Toys for Tots specifically, but that's not canned food. And a He-Man action figure isn't going to feed me. I remember getting like toy drives as a kid because I was poor. And I'd be like, this is great, but I'd rather have a PB&J. Eating out of aluminum tin cans and like boxed cheese that comes in cardboard. You know, government food was, I didn't know the difference. And then when I went to some friends' houses and I saw how they cook, I'm like, man, where are they getting this stuff from? Like, you just didn't know. I didn't know I was poor until, people pointed it out to me that I was poor. But it's weird. Like the same people in school who were my peers who would see me walk up to the end of the line with my tray and either get checked off because I was on the free meal club, or when I was in high school, my family was at a different tax bracket. So then we had reduced lunch. So I had to pay like a quarter or 50 cents, whatever it was at the time. And I'd see someone looking back and like judging me like, peasant. Man, survival is tough. Survival is tough. And especially when you take into consideration that I lived at like the precipice of a very wealthy area of the world. Like I lived right outside of the Hamptons. And so there was like that judgmental, you don't make money, you're not affluent enough, you shouldn't be here. I had those feelings my whole life. But later on as an adult, when I have a chance to help somebody who's in need, I help them. And I think that that's one of the best things you can do as somebody who's capable. When you're capable and you choose not to help, you're only hurting the other person more. That person needs it, and you could do something, and you chose not to. And there are so many people that can. And the crazy thing is, if I had no money in my bank account, but I was fed and I had a warm place to sleep, I would be happy because I don't chase the number. There's a good friend of mine, Rob Julian, who you know from class, and Rob talks about ending at zero, meaning if he dies with money in his bank account, he did it wrong. And his whole goal in life is to hit a certain number to where he can then retire and slowly start making his way down to zero and not try to just accumulate generational wealth and set up the next generation for success. He's teaching his kids how to work for their own, and he's doing everything he needs to be a good dad and support them and help them along the way, but he's not going to leave anything for them.
Well, that's because money's a tool. It's like
it is.
If you go to Home Depot and you get a shovel, it's like, I'm going to get 1 billion shovels for my kids. No, they're not going to do anything with 1 billion shovels. They're just going to waste them. But if you tell them, here's 1 billion shovels, convert it to something else that you can use for what worked for you, then you have something.
Yeah.
And he's a great guy.
Yeah, he is. But it's weird. The perception is reality thing, it kills me. And the number of people who pretend to be good people because they go on their social media, they show you the best versions of themselves. I don't want that content. I want to see the jagged scar. I want to see the healed, scar tissue and have the story behind that. Show me you lived. Don't show me the life you think you want us to see. I want to see the no makeup, waking up, answering the door look. Because if that's what I have to wake up to in the morning, I want to know. But the difference is it's like there are some people who just can't leave the house without 2 hours of foundation and makeup. I know because I dated one and it was wild. Like, hey, we can't do anything on short notice. It kills your ability to be spontaneous because people need so much setup to deliver that persona.
Is that like broken preparation?
Explain.
So obviously we talked earlier about it being prepared for something is better than trying to hope for a coincidence to happen. But when you put a lot of work into something that has no beneficial means, so you're putting 10 pounds of makeup for 2 hours, but you only go out and people see you for 30 minutes and you don't look that much. Actually, you might even look uglier because you have all this, everything's perfect in whatever world that is. So there's preparation, like efficient preparation, and then there's, I wouldn't say effective preparation, but just perceived preparation. Like you perceive that it brings you success, even though that's not what's helping you become successful.
I understand. And I think you're onto something.
I don't know if I'm probably not saying the best
No,
way.
it makes sense to me, and I do understand it. But that's not what I believe is happening in my scenario. I think it was more the fact that somebody gets so conditioned to what the behavior and response is that it becomes a Pavlovian reaction.
Okay, what's a Pavlov?
So Pavlov did the science experiment with the dog where he rang the bell, brought out the steak, and then the dog would salivate until eventually he would distance the time between when he brings out the steak, ring the bell, then bring out the steak, to the point where just the action of ringing the bell, regardless of the time, just gets the dog to salivate. That's operant conditioning, right? It's a psychological thing where you get used to a stimulus and the response, stimulus, response. Well, if somebody at some point or another put a little bit of makeup on and they got a compliment, all of a sudden that person just got an investment into their vanity, paid for by that compliment, to the point where now, what happens if I don't have it? Well, I stop getting those compliments. You start to develop these complexes based on a veneer that is completely fabricated. Like I said, I don't want to be involved with somebody who's stuck on something as trivial as looks, because that's fleeting. That's very fleeting. You can't do that when you're 80 and get the same result. Just can't.
Unless you're Betty White.
I love Betty White, R.I.P. But she wasn't doing that. She was not doing that. My grandmother was one of the most important people in my life, and she passed away a few years ago, and she got eyeliner tattooed on her eyes. Because for her, she didn't have the time to do her makeup as an older lady, as her vision was getting poorer, but she always wanted a bare minimum of that. So she went out and did that. And I remember thinking, Grandma, you're going to look really weird in your coffin later. I know that might be a little taboo to talk about, but let's talk about it, because honestly,
that's what needs to be talked about.
Why do we care about our looks that much? It's the function. When I think of the idea of the phrase form follows function, it doesn't. There are plenty of things that have a form with terrible function. Sometimes you just do things for the look of it. And I think when we do things for the look, we can do that, and that's fine. But in what context? Does it have something of service to us? Is it something of use? Maybe it's just a thought-provoking piece, right? If it's for art's sake, I can understand for art's sake, this just has to be pretty. But from a mechanical mind and an engineer's point of view, I'm constantly looking for function and efficiency. What does this do, and how well does it do it? Because if I can get better, find better at a price point that makes sense, that's what I'm going to use. That's what I want to surround myself with. I don't want a bunch of cheap tricks and pretty things that won't last. We're at a current point where everybody that's in the technological world that we live in, they're inundated daily with all the fat loss supplements, all the ways to put on muscle mass, all the ways to do your makeup, all the ways to get your hair styled, what clothing brands you should be wearing. And yet, we have doomsday preppers out there who, just got done tanning a hide, 21st century in America, tanning hides and making their own leather clothes for the post-apocalyptic world that's ahead of us. And who's to say who's wrong? I'm just sitting here as someone who's kind of leaning more towards those doomsday preppers, because at least I'm like, well, shoot, that's functional.
Yeah, at least it does something.
That you got a skill. You learned something. That other person, man, you want to spend your money dollars on something, go for it. You're entitled to do that. But don't then peddle it on me and tell me that's a lifestyle thing that I need to do. You don't know me. And I think the idea of getting out of our comfort zone and saying, what is the minimum I need, is huge for our personal development. When I got into the van lifing, which I did October 31st, 2020, and I've been doing ever since.
Remember the exact day.
Yeah, it was Halloween. Can't miss it. But when I got into the van lifing, and this upcoming Halloween will be 5 years that I've been living in a van, I had to skeletonize down my personal belongings to the point where I'm now down to 5 pairs of jeans, 10 pairs of shirts, 10 pairs of underwear, 10 pairs of socks, a few jackets, a few different types of shoe and footwear options just because of the time of year. So heavy boots in the winter, flip-flops in the summer, so on and so forth. And the same thing with my shorts and my summer attire. But it all fits in 2 drawers. I don't care that you'll see me next week and I'll have this shirt on. Or 2 weeks from now, I'll have this shirt on. I don't care. If you care about my rotation of my clothing enough to be like, didn't you just wear that? I will say, what the hell is wrong with you? And why does it make any kind of matter in your day to day?
Yeah. Like, why are you mad that I'm wearing this?
Shouldn't bother you. If I wear this tomorrow, that's a whole lot of my business. You'd be like, hey, you're a little right. I'll be like, oh shit, I'm sorry. But aside from that, it's like, why do we care? And I think it's because we get made to care about our looks. And I don't know when it started or where it started, but at some point it mattered and we need to get away from that.
Yeah. Is it possibly because it's easy? It's easy to be able to change. Because on one hand, it's like, yes, easy things are usually what everyone does, but like you can look in the mirror and you can say, I look different. I did something differently. And then because going back to like what you said earlier, that because people like compliment you for a look, that becomes that driving force to be able to like, oh, I changed my look. They compliment me on my look. That's what made me better. But on the other hand, it might be because you changed your look so you had that confidence, and then they were complimenting you on your confidence, but they didn't know that.
This is going to be a hot topic.
Oh yeah.
Get ready for it.
I don't mind.
A military comedian, who I will not name because I don't want to give him too much credit. He had a bit recently where he was being questioned in an interview kind of format. And the comment in this particular video was a statement of agreeance where it's like, hey, would you agree with this statement? Marines have been helping fat chicks get hooked up since 1775. And the guy is in Marine Corps attire and he's like, no. They've been helping Marines get hooked up since 1775. And I thought that was great because I happen to know plenty of Marines. They are not good with game. But when you talk about putting someone in a different set of clothes and giving them confidence, nothing does that like a uniform. A lot of these people should not go out in public. And yet, they get to wear their Marine Corps camis from 4 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. They're charged up and they are ready to go hit the club looking for love. And they go out with that confidence that they get from that idea of like, I'm a part of this thing, or I fit into this. And they're parlaying that, but into confidence. And maybe it's good. But it shouldn't, because at our core, clothes don't make the person, their manners do. And that line came up in the movie Kingsman. And I love the point of these people in these very nice, well-done suits. But the not the main character, but the character's mentor in the movie, at one point is like, he said the phrase, manners maketh man. And then he proceeds to beat the crap out of everybody in the bar. But the thing was, these guys come in and they're, dressed like thugs and they're not like dressed properly. And this other guy's in a 3-piece suit. He's got a cane, he full 9. And they're treating him differently because of how he looks. Because they think, he's some puff, he's this soft guy. And yet they're judging him based on what he's wearing. He's not judging them based on what they're wearing. He's judging them based on their manners. Then he proceeds to, beat them up because their manners suck. I think we need to worry about our manners. How we interact with people is the most important part. If I see how you treat a stranger, I'm going to assume that how you treat a friend is not much differently. You just probably lie a bit more. And that's where my head goes. When I think about what a good friend is, I think about my buddy Jeff Shaw on the West Coast. He's the kind of guy who will open up his home to anybody. I mean anybody. Before he even knew who I really was, I was getting ready to do a Jiu-Jitsu tournament in North Carolina, and he was one of the guys setting it up as a promoter. And he was like, hey, what day are you planning on coming down? And I was like, I'll probably make the drive the morning of. He's like, that's a 5-hour drive. How about you come the night before and crash at my house? And I was like, really? I was like, yeah, I've got a room downstairs. You can use it. I was like, sweet, thanks. Didn't know me. And from there, it spawned a, what's now like a 15, 10, 12-year friendship. All because he opened up his home. And I know he's done that multiple times to multiple people from all different walks of life. He's a selfless person. If any one of us had 5% of that in us, the world would be a better place. But unfortunately, it ends up being like these super empathetic people who go well out of their way to do it for a lot of people, and then 100 people who are just bystanders. That's usually how it happens.
Yeah. What would you say about being, because I find myself to be in a lot of points where like I'm working on something, I'm really invested into it, and then someone either I know very well or someone I don't know very well comes up to me and wants to engage in a conversation, but because my mind's already on something else, and once I do something, I have to stop. What would you say about talking to people when your mind is already preoccupied? And on one hand, you come across as like maybe angry or like pissed off that they're talking to you, but in reality, you want to talk to them, but this is not the right time for it.
So my significant other and I, we've got different neurodivergent behaviors that we both exhibit. And for her, she's got her mind all over the place, ADHD. And for me, I'm very structured, OCD, and things are very compartmentalized and focused in like a pattern that has to be held. And even though it's manufactured in my own brain, it's very hard for me to break those cycles and the desire to do it. And so if I'm in a loop, when I went through marriage counseling back in the day, the marriage counselor I was dealing with was from the vet center and specifically for veterans. And the way he explained it to me was most male thought processes get kind of pigeonholed into this idea of like a grouping of paper clips in a line like a train, where this thought goes to this thought, to this thought, to this thought. I wake up, I go to the bathroom, I brush my teeth, I shave, I do this, I do this. And then he laid out a bunch of paper clips on the table and he separated them all so that most of them were not touching any others. Some of them were doubled down, but for the most part, they were all spread out. And he says, this is the concurrent thought processes of most women. How they can go over here and they don't have to finish any one of them, but they can go over here and have this thought, go over here and have this thought. And sometimes there's these double thoughts, and sometimes it's here and here and here. And sometimes they can be complete, but they're still away and they never get like resolved in the true sense of like, it's behind me now. It's like, it's resolved, but it's still here. Now, what happens when that universe collides with that train track? What happens is a rogue paperclip, someone else's thought, gets in the way of your line of thinking. And we get derailed mentally. And we snap back at the person. You've interrupted my thought process. What we have to do is be better at making space. If I spread out those same paper clips that I had in my line of thoughts, and I leave enough space to where there's never a collision, where I make time for other people's thoughts to get in, I have now exhibited what's called active listening. You take a breath or two after the speaker is done speaking to breathe. And that is me showing you through my inaction of speaking, but the action of taking time that I have digested what you said and I made space in my tracks for your thought. Now I'll answer you. Why can't we do that? Thich Nhat Hanh, famous author, I hope I'm not butchering his name, but he wrote many, many self-help books on how to communicate and just be better people. In his book, Anger, he talks about active listening, taking that 1 or 2 breaths just to say, I have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so I'll listen twice as much as I speak. And when you're done speaking, I heard what you said, now let me answer.
What about when, at least for me, there's people that I have different categories. I've got most people in the world that I don't really care about. Someone walking around on the road, they get run over, I don't really care. They can get run over. Then I have acquaintances, which are people that I interact with, but I don't know them very well. Or I'll know them by name or something, but just I know that they exist. Then you got friends who are people that I know really well. I enjoy being around them, like a lot of people in jiu-jitsu. Just have a great time with them. But I wouldn't connect on them on a personal level. And then I have like best friends who are like one step above very few people. Like I went from the world to a couple hundred people to maybe 50 people. Now we're down to like 10. And then I got my inner circle, which is like people I've known for at least 2 years, and I really rely on their advice whenever if we ever talk. At that point, sometimes we don't, but inner circle, people I really trust, and then I have my family, which is like can't go any further than that. In my mind, because I'm also a dude, I have different compartments for different people. And where do you draw the line of when you need to, how much time you're able to give someone for, like, let's say they came up to you with a problem, but you haven't given them a lot of value and they haven't really given you a lot of value, but they are asking for your help for something because they see something in you that you haven't really shown them, but kind of had by example.
We all have more free time in our day than we claim to. We all do. When someone's like, oh, I've got no time, you have time somewhere. Milk those 2 minutes, milk those 3 minutes. There's usually a short answer to something just to let people know that you're listening. But there's also nothing wrong with responding back and just saying, I heard what you're asking. This is a bigger ask. I'm going to take a lot of time to think about this before I give you the answer because I don't want you to think that I'm just going to, yeah, here you go. That's even worse when it's the perception of I helped, but I didn't.
And being nice but not kind, or being kind but not nice. No, being nice but not kind.
Correct. Certain platitudes, they don't matter to me. I don't care if you say thank you. I just need to know that it didn't fall on deaf ears or that I didn't waste my own time. Because if I'm going to make that time for somebody and I'm going to do it right, I want to make sure that I'm also not just, throwing a gift into the wind. I would hate nothing more than to have like some really sound, good stuff to give somebody after I had just made that time and made the spacing in between my paper clips to let them through, and just for it to be a big waste. That sucks. And that happens too, but you got to accept that you're not going to be 100% at any one thing ever. So even with that, you just got to take a few L's and be like, I'm trying a thing. I'm not an expert at it, but I was at least attempting to be a good person.
Yeah. Whenever you meet those, or whenever you have that time segmented out, do you have the expectation of how long that might take?
Not usually, but I know that whenever I'm done doing any task, because of how I'm task-based and driven, I think about the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And they're usually timed out within my day. And I live a very structured life. So if I know how much time I have before the next thing, I will almost give the complete maximum amount of time for that person until it's necessary for me to be elsewhere. And that's what I mean by saying most of us have more free time than we admit to, and we just don't want to admit that we have that free time because then we give power to the other party and we think they're going to abuse that thing we're giving them, and we're not. If they need help, we give help. And if everyone could do that just 10% of the time, we would be better.
How would you define power when it comes to like social interactions?
Well, true power in a mixed grouping of people is the ability to not get frazzled because you heard conflicting ideologies. So when I think of like TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, people are really getting heated over that. And I'm a very moderate person. I've gone on the record a few times saying I have no problem with my gay friends defending their marijuana plants with their automatic machine guns. It's a very niche grouping of people, right? It's like a little bit of the right, a little bit of the left. It's like I'm a weird guy in that I believe in a lot of personal freedoms, but I also believe in giving other people their space and not being in everybody's business. So when I'm in a social engagement of some kind that I'm not familiar with everybody involved, I usually see if there's cliques. And if there's like a grouping of people over here, a grouping of people over here, and they're not interacting, I'm going to be really weirded out because it's like, oh, there's more here than what's being said out loud. Whether it's because a group of people who look similar went together or something, right? Whatever it is that's causing that division, I don't want any part of that. But when I hear like a big group of people and they're getting heated over something, it's like, why? Like, I get that you can have your take and your stance, but unless the room I'm in are like my peers on the thing that I'm working on, it doesn't really matter. Like if it's not my profession, if it's not my passion project, if it's not something that I'm actually in the course of working on, if it's just a belief system and your belief system gets challenged by words to the point where you feel you need to get heated and argumentative, your beliefs weren't that strong. Like you just got swayed to the point of anger because something someone said. Why do you care?
Yeah. Well, the best way to remedy that is to have the curiosity of why you're wrong or why someone else thinks you're wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I like to listen to people when they tell me things that are counter to my beliefs because it's going to make me go about a journey of self-discovery where I find out if I was false or not, or if I had maybe false pretenses that led me to that belief system. One of the best things that we could ever do is break the cycle of what was given to us, right? When I think about your ethics and your morals, ethics can be learned. Morals we usually pick up from our parents and our friend groups and the people we surround ourselves with. And it's really hard once you've established that really heavily in your teens and your 20s to change it later in your life. But it happens. And when I see somebody who's really diehard one way and they're young, my best advice is just treat your mind like a parachute. It works best when open. When you just say, no, I can't listen to that. Great. You're going to die on the vine mentally. You are going to be in a form of stasis up here in your brain for the rest of your life because you didn't develop the ability to just listen to other people's ideas, whether you agree with them or not, and be a civilized person about it. The second you downgrade yourself to name calling and baseless accusations and all that other stuff, you're showing you're an idiot. And Mark Twain said it best, never argue with an idiot. They'll bring you down to their level and they'll beat you with experience. So for us, we just need to be better ambassadors for what it means to be active listeners who aren't dead set in their belief systems to the point where you can challenge yourself and challenge others, but in an amicable way where it's just about the idea of listening and hearing more. I don't care if you tell me your lifestyle is the best. Great, your lifestyle is the best.
Yeah, for you. Yeah.
I'm just going to give you a pat on the back, high five you, and go about my day. But the second you're like, you, meaning me, need to follow your lifestyle, I'll say something like, why do you feel that way? Why is one of the most powerful questions. Ask any toddler or any juvenile, they'll tell you why is an important question. Why answers a lot. Yeah. So when someone gives me their why, I'm going to ask why again. Because that second why now starts getting us into philosophy. What is philosophy? The art of asking one more question, right? But once we can pontificate on that next thing, I might have opened a can of worms you weren't ready for. And sometimes it's better to just open that gas grenade in the middle of the room and just let it go off. Because if you want to get on your high horse and talk about whatever topic, and I go, why do you feel that way? And then you tell me what you think. And I go, why did you get to that conclusion? Man, it's not that I'm poking the bear. It's that I just really genuinely want to know if this was inception, like you came up with this thought of your own, or is there a personality out there that is so powerful in your closed circle that it swayed you to making that thought yours? Because there's a lot of times that I'll be in the locker room upstairs and it just turns into a repeat of whatever recent Joe Rogan episode. And I'm not saying Joe Rogan isn't good for some people, but by and large, there's a culture of young men who just don't even know how to be themselves without first finding out how they should be from that show or other shows like it. And it's really disheartening because we're losing our individuality and we're becoming cookie cutter representations of one type of person, to the point where almost every high school aged male and lower 20-year-old male has the same broccoli haircut. They look the same, they dress the same, they talk the same, and then they wonder why women don't want them in their demographics. Well, you're not, what are you going to give me that the other guy can't? There's no substance. They're losing that.
It's like they're making themselves average instead of trying to make themselves different or make themselves kind of wondering your opinion on this. if people have to be different, have to change, have to become better, I guess, having too many thoughts here.
Go for it.
I remember you saying one time that there was I remember it was beans and something else that's one supplements the other to make a whole protein.
Incomplete proteins.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that in relation to you becoming, not that you don't get everything from one source, but you use multiple sources to become your own person.
Correct. So much the same way that I was talking about my buddy Jeff Shaw on the West Coast, I'll talk about him again. He's a vegan. He's not a diehard vegan. Let me differentiate real quick, just because if anybody listening and watching, there's an important distinction. Jeff eats honey. There are some vegans that will say that's mistreatment of the bees. You can't do that, right? Like no bee died in the making of his honey, so Jeff eats honey. If Jeff were in a situation, like I'll use a specific tribe out there, the Lummies. They have a salmon festival every spring. If Jeff found himself on the beaches on Lummi Island in the spring during the salmon festival, and someone walks up, an indigenous person walks up and gives Jeff a piece of salmon from a spit on the beach, do you think Jeff's going to be like, no, I'm vegan? Jeff's going to put it in his mouth, he's going to eat that salmon, and he's going to thank that person, because there's something to be said about saying, I choose a vegan lifestyle because I don't want to fill in the blank, or I want to fill in the blank. There's a difference by saying there's a food source in front of me that is what it is. Like I can't undead that fish, right? It's dead. I can't bring it back. They've already cooked it. It's on the beach. This is their culture. I am on their land. They're giving me this gift. How would I look if from my position of virtue, like I will not have your fish because I am that vegan? No, Jeff just eats it because he understands that being a human and taking the gift is more valuable, and his stomach can ingest that fish and he won't die and he won't get, disbarred from vegan heaven later. It's not one of those things. So the difference between the social contracts that we make in our own heads behind what we see ourselves as, it's all prefabricated. So once we can get out of that idea of we make the prisons that bind us, socially, we say, I can't talk to that person. You totally can. You totally can. Now, don't be a jerk about it, right? Like yell across the restaurant, hey, Debo, nothing like that. But get to the point where you say to yourself, I can talk to just about anyone at any time within my purview and my area of influence. And if they decide to be hostile to me just talking to them, great, that's someone I don't need to talk to ever again. But for someone to say, oh, I can't talk to that person, they're out of my league, or they drove that, or they came in wearing this, or that, they're people. Talk to people. And the best part is the more people you talk to, the better you get at your oratory skills, the more likely you are to hold a conversation well and for longer, and the more people want to talk to you. But it starts with being human and humanizing the other person and giving them the chance to explain themselves and not be combative about how they explained it. You're allowed to have your differences of opinions, and I'm allowed to have mine too. But when we're trying to change the thought process of other people to align with our own, it's almost as if we vilified their original thought process as lesser than. And now we are saying we had the better thought. And most of the time we don't for them. Even if our thought is good for us, it doesn't always work out for the other person. So we have to at least be mindful of different situations for different folks and disconnecting from that regardless of how we perceive our help being given.
What about the fear? Because I don't know where I've heard this, but stupid people have confidence and intelligent people have fear. That someone who could be really idiotic, but they have like this overwhelming amount of confidence in what they do, even though they have nothing to back it up, that they have more confidence in someone who's actually intelligent, who actually has the skills to back it up. And they choose to be more fearful because they are thinking about all the possibilities, all the ways that can go wrong. Especially, just taking me, for example, I'm really nervous around women. Like I could barely talk to one. And when I do, it's like, oh wait, this is a lot easier than I thought. But there's always that like recurring thing in my mind that's like, You can't talk to women. You're always going to think about, hey, can I wife them up? Can I date them? Is this person I want to be with the rest of my life? And then that like overthinking kicks in and I start going over and over.
Well, I think it's great to say that intelligent people are generally more fearful because there's a lot to be afraid of once you learn of its existence. And we say the terminology all the time, ignorance is bliss. If you don't know that things out there can hurt you, can kill you, can do bad things to you, will jeopardize your career, can do all these bad things, can set you back. If you don't know, you live a very lovely life. Like, you've got golden retriever energy, right? Like, you're just going through life like everything's bubbles and rainbows. Everything's great because you just don't know. But here's how you combat the fear as an intelligent person. Once you're intelligent enough to say, I have these fears, you are also intelligent enough to understand that willpower is the only thing that beats fear. The only thing that beats fear is willpower. Now, how do you develop strong willpower? In stages. You have to build yourself these small goals of saying, what is the smallest issue I have? Let me learn to overcome the smallest setback I have. So let's say I have 3 main fears. And for sake of argument, I'm just going to make up some arbitrary fears. These are not David Porter's fears. So don't think you can hit me with these later. I'm just making these up. Let's say I have one fear, which is I want to have a certain amount of money in my bank account. And until I get there, I don't feel financially satisfied or financially certain about my predicament, right? That's a real fear that some people have, right? Like security. Security is a fear. The other thing, I don't think other people are going to be attractive to me. Okay, that's a fear some people have. And then another one could be, there is a car in the wrong lane looking at me, right? Now, these can all be concurrent, but one of them takes all of your interest right away, right? Once you understand that there's one of those things you can change at this very moment, like you can deal with that by addressing that situation. But if you're too busy worried about the other two, and that final moment, you're focusing on the wrong thing at the wrong time. And this happens often. And I made this pretty egregious, right? Like I gave like 2 kind of common things and one that's like, where's that coming from? But that's how we act. There's usually a fairly identifiable primary thing that we all should be focusing on. And then we don't, even though it's the one that we can impact right away. But we usually get so caught up with the other things that we run head first into the other third thing, whatever it might be, pick your poison. And then only after the fact do we go, oh man, I should have put my focus and attention into that. I'll make it more my own. Currently, I'm worried about putting on the right amount of weight. Since I lost a lot of weight, I want to get the right kind of weight back on. That's something that I'm taking care of, right? I have the willpower to follow that through in a meaningful way. And I've taken steps from the way I do my diet, the planning, everything about it. Great. That's one fear I have. The other one, there's a volcano going off in Hawaii right now that's about 30 miles from my current property. So almost every day I'm checking the news to see where the lava flow is going because I want to make sure that I didn't just drop 6 figures on a plot of lava. Okay. And then another fear I have is that when I eventually do make my final move to Hawaii, what happens to the program when I leave it? Those are my 3 big fears right now. I can focus on the leaving XCAL thing, but that's 3 to 5 years from now. I can focus on the Hawaii thing. I live in Virginia. So my weight is the thing that I need to show the most willpower on. And as a part of showing willpower, sometimes inaction is a type of willpower. Can I change where I bought my land in Hawaii easily? No. So what does me running to my phone to check an update every hour change? If my land gets covered in lava now versus 10 hours from now, it's not going to change when I can go out there and fix it. I can't. So it's something where I have to say, I will look at the end of the night one time. And I have to build that willpower to not just constantly look and micromanage a situation that I cannot control. The same way that I'm not going to worry about who or what or how the program is and who's taking over and whatever 3 to 5 years from now. That's such a later problem. But me taking my 2 scoops of mass gainer this morning is directly impacting my other fear, which is my weight loss and trying to get ahead of it. And having that willpower to set my alarm and say at 10 o'clock and at 4 o'clock, I'm going to have this. And I'm going to do it every day consistently. And that's that. We got to take ownership of our fears by realistically addressing them head on, identifying them, saying what they are, and coming up with reasonable solutions on a timeline that makes sense based on frequency or proximity to the fear.
Yeah. Is it almost like mental fears are hard to face but easy to overcome?
No. Physical fears are way easier to overcome. Like if you're afraid of heights, don't go next to ledges, right? Don't go up a ladder. You're afraid of heights, don't do those things. It's really easy to deal with physical fears. I am deathly afraid of one animal on planet Earth. Alligator snapping turtles. It is an unreasonable fear. Unreasonable.
I was actually planning on sending you an alligator snapping turtle
I would punch you in the throat.
on Halloween.
I would punch you in the throat. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I am deathly afraid. To the point where my ex-wife got me a Build-A-Bear that was actually a snapping turtle, and the voice box she put into it was a lion roaring, and she named it Snap. Might be my least favorite gift of all time. Now, yeah, we made it, right? But that's one person looking at me who's supposed to be my most supportive ally, the person I married, my most supportive ally, and instead taking one of my fears and making a joke out of it. Now, I know it's an unreasonable fear. Doesn't change the fact that it's mine and that my person wasn't with me in my corner on that.
Yeah, and the best relationships are the ones where you don't put someone's past against them.
Yes. So I have this physical fear. I don't go to Louisiana where they live. I just don't do it. I don't go anywhere near brackish water barefoot. I just don't do it. It's easy to deal with physical fears. It's really hard to deal with mental fears. You ever sit in bed at night and you're like, time to go to bed. And then all of a sudden, bolt upright because you just had the dumbest thought in your head and you're like, now I can't shake that. Mental fears are harder to hang up. To get over your hangups on. And the best way I have for dealing with it is by slowly incorporating them into a physical manifestation and then dealing with it in manageable doses.
Okay, so like voodoo dolls.
I wouldn't say that's the premier way of doing it, but what I mean to say is like, let's say security as a fear.
Like emotional security or like physical security?
We'll say fiscal.
Physical, okay.
Like somewhere someone once said, it's beneficial to have three months worth of pay in your bank account.
Yeah. Now it's like 6 or 12 months, but yeah.
Yeah. Somewhere someone said that, right? And when you sit down and you do the guerrilla math and you think about what that number is, and then you go and check your bank account, you might feel a certain way if it isn't what someone told you it should be. I would say, put it into a more manageable way. Even if you're not a spreadsheet kind of person, list your bills, list your expenses, see what that actually boils down to. You might not spend as much as other people do, or your overhead might not be as much as other people's overhead is. So your egg, or whatever you want to call it, whatever is in your bank account that's going to give you that good feeling, might be lower than what other people tell you. Make it make sense. Put it into a real world application and see if you can test those fears and say, I am better than this unreasonable expectation that I need this to feel a certain way. I have this and it's good enough because I feel this way after I looked at this math. And sometimes it's just breaking it down Barney style has the best feeling for us because we could say, I now have managed this in a more meaningful way. I think I talked to you about the hot bowl of soup analogy. You get a hot bowl of soup in front of you. You put your spoon right into the middle and take a bite, you're going to burn your mouth. But if you take the edge of your spoon and you just go to the rim of the bowl and you pull a little bit from the side, just a little bit, thousands of little bits later, you finish the bowl, never burning your mouth because your workload was manageable based on what the material was that you had to work with. And you didn't try to just dive right in and do it the hard way. You figured out a better method and delivery for your action. And if you can figure out a way to make that analogy work for whatever physical or mental thing you have in front of you, just make it smaller, things. I tell people that have smoking addictions, trying to quit smoking is really that fight of willpower, because once you've gotten through a certain number of days, the physical addiction is over. The physical addiction is over. You mentally want the cigarette. You want the other thing. You've got to just tell yourself, it's done. My body no longer even wants it. Now I just think I want it. You got to beat that demon now. But the first part is get through day one. You can get through day one and get through day two. And it doesn't matter how many day ones you have. And that's the part that kills me. We talked about this last time with regards to failing. Fail again, fail better. Do it again and again and again until you get that success. And maybe your success this time isn't true victory. Maybe it's, I showed myself I could go 2 days without. Next time, do 5. Next time, do a week. Eventually, you'll get to that point where you don't do it again. And you can do that for learning skills too. Today, I threw a dart at a dartboard 10 times. Next week, I'll do it 20. The time after that, I'll do it more. And maybe I don't do it more. Maybe now I'm looking for precision and I do it better. I do the same 5, but now they're more accurate. Whatever the endeavor, put it in a easy to digest, manageable way and start setting yourself up for smaller successes that'll lead to the greater success. You want to eat the whole bowl of soup, do it small bite by small bite. Maybe it takes you 1,000 times. It's fine.
Yeah. What about the complacency of every day? Like you've done day one so many times and now you're just like, it's day one. I'm going to fail anyways. I guess at that point, you already have the expectation of failing.
If you say to yourself at any point, why am I doing this? The second you let that creep in, your willpower was broken. I've said it on more than one occasion, I'm too dumb to quit. So when I find a task, I can't even think of one thing right now off the top of my head that I started and didn't at least get to some finish line on. Because the only true failure in the world is when you set out to do something and you stop before you've even finished it. Or you don't even try to complete it, right? Like there are books I wanted to put down and I get to the final page. There are movies I've wanted to walk out of and I get to the credits. There are so many menial tasks like digging a hole or pushing a broom or something. But trust me when I say, I don't care how bad it is. Get to the end. Get to the end, because when you finish a task, regardless of how much you hated it, you'll be grateful for the fact that you finished. Finishing is awesome. Finishing is such a great feeling because it really releases that catharsis of whatever it was that you were getting behind. You did a thing. You finished. And for me, that's like the biggest drug in my life. Completing a task. And you know how you can get that fix constantly? Give yourself little tasks all day. I said I'm task driven. I love setting myself up for success. I have an hour private lesson. I'm going to crush that lesson. And I show up ready to go. After that lesson, got to go make lunch. I'm going to crush lunch, right? Doesn't matter that it's just lunch. It doesn't matter that it was just a lesson. And I've done thousands of lessons. I show up with that level of enthusiasm to every task I do. Watch me make a sandwich. It's impressive. It's impressive because every single time it's a thing of art because I love what I do. If I am doing a thing, nothing is haphazard or lackadaisical. Everything is thought-provoking or at least thoughtful, where I go into it as if it's my first time, as if I want to show the world the best way of making this thing. And it doesn't matter if the standard isn't the expert standard. It's the fact that I tried it and I did it.
I'm not sure if it was John Adams or Abigail Adams who said that there are two creatures of value on the face of the earth, those with the commitment and those who require the commitment of others.
That's a deep cut.
It's like when you keep the word you gave to yourself. Because one of the most valuable things in the world is someone giving you their word, that I give you my word that I'm going to get this done or I'm going to do this. And it's like, you can't beat that because once you give that, you've done something more. But there's the other side of it is if you don't keep the word that you gave to yourself, that's even worse. It's like, if you can't do it to yourself, why are you giving your word to other people? It's like commitment is almost as important as consistency and being on top of things.
Do you know the core values of the Marine Corps?
Not off the top of my head.
There are 3. Honor, courage, commitment. Those are the 3 core values of the Marine Corps. Now, honor, obviously, we think we know what that means, right? But what does it mean to have honor? And when you think about like someone who sticks to their word, someone who is reliable, I think of that like that's honor. Like you're reliable. You have a code of ethics and you stand by it. And so when you have somebody that can put their seal of approval on that person and say that person is reliable, that's a huge asset. That person has made themselves show their value. Commitment, we talked about a ton, right? Courage. What is courage? Courage has many different forms. There's physical courage, mental courage, emotional courage, right? But when I think of it, it's saying, I will stand by this idea, this concept, this task, regardless of the hardships. It brings me to a quote from Norse mythology, where the king of the gods, Odin, the one with one eye, he gave up his eye for future sight. And in it, he saw that all the Aesir, the gods of the Norse pantheon, were going to die in the final battle. Now, they were going to die making sure the earth people on Midgard, lived. So they were basically sacrificing themselves for little old us in their folklore. Now, the reason why I think it's good is because there was a quote from their book where it said, the power of good is not shown by triumphantly defeating evil, but by continuing to resist it even while you face certain defeat. They knew they were going to lose, but they knew that by fighting, they were going to give a better life for us. So they fought anyway, even though they knew they were going to lose, because that's what good people do. They fight. They work for it. And that message is so amazing, right? The power of good is not shown by triumphantly defeating evil, but by continuing to resist it, even if you were to face certain defeat. I know I could lose, but I'm good because I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah. Kind of ties into a good person is a bad person is someone who puts their pains against other people. A good person is someone who takes their pains and doesn't put that against other people. There's also another thing, which is loyalty. I think there was someone talking about Navy SEALs and how a Navy SEAL instructor would rather have someone who is loyal over someone who's intelligent.
I think I was telling you this. So we have a scale where it's job capability, right? Job capability and trust. And you can flip the X and Y, it doesn't matter, but you have trust and you have capabilities. Most people would think you want someone high capability, high trust. And those people can exist, but they're rare. You're usually going to find people of a different side of this equation, which is they spike on one and they're lower on another. Now, would you rather have someone whose job capabilities are super high, but you can't trust them? Or would you rather have someone whose job capabilities are lower, but you can trust them? And the answer is, you want someone you could trust with your life, but not with your wife? Or do you want someone you could trust with your wife, but not with your life? I can teach you with enough time how to get to the capable level to save my life. But if I can't trust you, that's something that we can't fix overnight. Once again, what do we say about morals and ethics? You can learn ethics. Your morals were given to you at a young age, and if you didn't get them well and established, you probably have some bad morals coming into the situation later. So Navy SEALs would rather have someone who's kind of mid capabilities, mid trust. Because I don't need you to be the most trustworthy person I know. I just need you trustworthy in this capacity. And then I don't need you to have all the things figured out. I just need to know that you're not an idiot so that I can teach you into these other jobs or these other roles. So you're kind of looking for someone middle of the pack. And that's always been really interesting to me because we think of these operators in special forces and different things as great at everything. Like they don't even have to wipe after they go number 2. Like they're perfect, right? But it's the exact opposite. It's usually someone with a barely functioning brain, but it's mechanically wired to figure out violence really well. And they have a great sense of danger and they're willing to put their bodies on the line. I think that's like the bare minimum. And then after that, it's like, okay, can you comprehend English? Can you at least read this thing? Can you follow orders? And then after that, it's like, okay, go do the thing. And next thing you know, question mark, Osama bin Laden's captured. Like, that's how it basically comes down. Yeah. And that's obviously downplaying the amount of training these folks have to do. But like I said, if you go middle of the pack on those two lines, intersecting lines, you can build the other through skill and training. It's going to be way harder to take someone with low trust and make them a part of a functioning team at that level.
How would you define trust? Well, what's your personal definition of trust?
We first have to talk about implicit versus explicit communication. So, implicit communication.
Yeah, body language, tone of voice.
Yeah. When are you going to look that way? Okay, so how come my implicit communication didn't work?
Because I know what you're trying to get to.
Okay, good. Look to your right. Okay, good. Explicit communication. It's very direct, right? Very direct.
Yeah.
What if I told you that most of the time we misread signals because we don't interpret the implicit communication that others give us all the time? Sometimes the word quality isn't what we should be listening to. It's usually the mannerisms of the person saying the thing that we should really be focusing on. So if someone says, man, today was tough, and they look like they're kind of in a bad spot, lead with some questions that, oh, why was it today tough? Okay. Versus someone who's like, glad that day's over. How you say it matters. Like someone who's relieved and they're in a better place over it versus someone who's like, man, today, versus, glad today's over. Those are two different people. One you should do a buddy check on, right? And we don't do enough of that trying to figure out the communication piece through the implied way that they stated their statement. So when I think of trust, it starts with, do you trust me enough to actually tell me what's wrong? Or do you trust me to pick up your implicit communication? Because I'll tell you right now, I don't do well at implicit communication. So you not opening up enough to actually tell me what's going on is you telling me right away, you don't trust me enough to tell me what's wrong. Therefore, I'm not in that circle to help you. You open up to me and you say, hey, I have this issue with this thing. Can you help? I'm going to be like, whoa, this is explicit. This is you very much. Please give me what you can. I'm going to give you what I can. And you're telling me through your action that you trust what I have to say or what I can do enough. By giving, you get. By giving me trust, you get my trust because I'm going to give you the best I have. After that, we're not playing games, right? You're not playing games. You're not giving me the over and over and over again, right? Once you stop mincing your words and you get to the point and you tell me what it is, we can move, we can go, we can act on it. What I don't do well is deal in hypotheticals. We could spin our wheels on all the what ifs. Show me the what is. What is matters. What if, whatever. And I think if more of us can get through that, the better we'll be. I tell people I don't worry because worrying makes you suffer twice. And it's real. It really is real. People worry themselves into their gray. We shouldn't be that way, right? I think two things are inalienable to me. One, if you can communicate well enough, you can most likely find the problem behind any intelligent conversation. Two, if you find that through intelligent conversation, you're only having a one-way conversation, it's time to end the conversation. I can't change minds. I can't. But at the same time, I'm not going to waste my time. Time is a valuable resource. I only have so many paper clips I can make space for. So at some point or another, if I feel like I'm just spinning my wheels, I move on. And it's not a disrespect thing to the person involved in that particular setting. It's more of a fact of if you didn't have something of relevance that really matters and is time pressing for me, there are probably other things in my day that I can make wins on. And it just so happened that today you're not getting the W. You didn't get me to fix your thing right there because you're under the wrong pretenses of what you're asking for. You're not asking me directly enough. I didn't have the signals lined up, so I didn't even know that there was something I could fix. Maybe next time don't be so ambiguous with me. Give me the direct response and I can give you the direct answer. And I have nothing wrong with people who are curt I would rather someone's curt with me and gives me the direct hard answer than beat around the bush and give me something soft. I don't care for that stuff. Like, offend me, don't worry about offending me, just say it, because I'm not a mind reader.
Right. How would you say you have treated yourself throughout all the relationships you've been through?
Poorly. I mean, even in the relationship I'm in now, which has been on for over a decade, I would say that only in the last 5 years did I really get to the point where I'm like, cool, I'm acting like a human should. I think that the reason why so many men get called dogs is because at its core, when we think of dogs as far as pets are concerned, I'm not talking like sled dogs or dogs that work for real. I'm talking like pets. When I think of dogs as pets, they're there for the companionship, the fact that it's a tail wag when you walk in the door. And I think that some people would want their significant other to just be that, to just be a companion that wags their tail when you walk in the door. And then without substance or other things going on in the relationship, it makes it seem like it's only about the times when the tail gets wagged or, you know, you're getting licked on the face or whatever. It's like that dog is only as great as the love they give you. That's a crappy way to be in any relationship. And then when you think it's all about the sex or you think it's all about like the physical interactions, and then you get boiled down into the, all men are dogs or all men are pigs, or, you know, you name something and it's like, there was a social contract that we were going to be together and maybe we were intimate, maybe not, but whatever the case may be, we were together. What was that for? Was it because we enjoy each other's company or is it because we enjoy each other romantically in that situation? And sometimes that's it for a lot of people. But to think of any one grouping of people as just representing something else. Obviously, I said it before. Absolutes, I don't deal with it. But do I believe in some generalizations because there's enough empirical data out there to support at least the idea of this thing being existent? Of course I do. And by and large, dudes screw it up for dudes everywhere. Constantly. How do we combat that? By saying to ourselves, how will I be better on the next rep? If you treat a protracted or elongated relationship as one rep, doesn't matter if it was 1 month, one date, or 1 year, or one full committed 10-year relationship or longer. It's one rep. How much are you going to do the next one better? Right? So when I think about things like, I need to do a forward shoulder roll. Great. First, it's, did I die? Great. Now that I didn't die doing this mundane task, did I do it well? And how am I going to keep doing it until the level of perfection? You very rarely do something one time and just nail it out of the park. So rather than try to make lightning strike and then make lightning strike again, you should just set yourself up for easier standards of, can I be in a monogamous relationship where I put 3 things above all else? I'm going to be a trustworthy, caring, and attentive partner. Just do that. Can I do that for a week? Can I do that for a month? Oh, relationship's over. Okay, did I do those 3 things? I was trustworthy. I was committed. You know, I did the things. Great. I'm a good person. Could I have done better? Going to the next relationship. And now it's doing those things at the level you can, best level you can, and longer. And you're trying to train yourself to be conditioned to, I am the best version of me I can be in this relationship, while also trying not to lose your identity. Because one of the worst things that happens is couples get together and then they just become that couple and they lose their individualness. This person was this way beforehand. This person was this way beforehand. They come together. Now there's something completely different and it's over here. And you can never get this friend to come back here and this friend to come back here. So I would say being honest with yourself up front and then being honest with the person that you're with and saying, hey, I like my little army men figures. Don't make me lose this. This is a part of who I am when you met me and you like me for me. You might not like that part of me, but it's part of me. Don't make me lose that just because you don't like it. Instead, you need to separate your paper clips a little bit so I've got some space so that I can go through and do that thing every once in a while. And having that ability to say, I give to you in the hopes that you give to me. And we have this reciprocity across all levels of it, from the communication to the romantic side of things, every area of it. As long as that reciprocity is there and no one feels like they're being taken advantage of, trust gets built better that way, just because we're open with our communication and our fears and our everything else, and we're being completely vulnerable. And we say, I'm showing you this as a token of trust. Don't abuse it. Don't get me the stuffed animal of the snapping turtle, right? Like, I'm telling you, these are my triggers. I'm telling you, these are my hobbies or my passions. Do with it as you will. And just know that right now, the judges are watching, right? Like the three little judges holding scorecards. And it's like, you're getting scored. And the same way that I know your three little judges are scoring me. How did I do the dishes? Did I towel dry everything correctly? Like, whatever it might be, whatever thing you're looking for me to do. I only bring up dishes because I'm really good at it, by the way. I'm really good at doing the dishes. But it's like, whatever the task is that you set me out to do, I know that there's even a little bit of judgment going on. Like, if I did a piss poor job, I know that that should come back and bite me in the butt. I know that if I do a great job, a part of me, whether it's toxic or not, wants to be told I did a good job. But I have to train myself through really good just awareness and saying, I know I did a good job. That's good enough for me. Now, if the other person happens to say I did a good job, I need to not get on my little pedestal and be like, yeah, I did. And just accept the compliment for what it is, them noticing. But should I expect them to notice? Be good because you want to be good, not because you think other people are watching.
And you can't force someone to like you. You can't force someone to fall in love with you. You can just show who you are. And if they like it, they'll be with you. If they don't, that's going to be pretty obvious.
That's good.
Is there anything you would have told yourself when you first started, or maybe in your first marriage or before that, that you would have, if you had known like one thing, it would have made everything else a little bit easier to manage?
I don't think it's one thing. I think it's several things. Like,
what would be like an outlier? Something that's been pretty consistent that would be a good generalization that you still hold to this day?
In the common era, I think most of us have some kind of like lock protector on our screen. I think one of the first things, and this is a hot topic, but I think one of the first things is let your significant other know your password to your phone. Like, if I have things to hide, that's probably reason enough to not be in a relationship. That's it right there. And if someone were to get, and if this soundbite goes on the internet and someone's like, you're wrong. And I'm like, no, you're hiding something. Let them fight me back with whatever firepower they want, where they say, well, my privacy. My question will be, privacy to what? To what? Like, if, and I'm just going to say this as an example, not that this is me, but let's say I have a porn addiction. However you feel about it, whatever. But if that's something that I'm keeping from my significant other because I don't want them to see that, that shows that I've got intimacy issues with my partner. Like, I'm not even willing to cross that bridge. Now, what does that mean? Am I doing behaviors differently because like I'm hiding that part of myself? That will ultimately lead to issues within the relationship because you're harboring things to yourself that are festering and you're keeping them kind of cloistered off to the side and you're not being open and vulnerable. Like, if you don't take the time to say, my person gets access to me in all my forms, including my search history, like, that means you don't trust them. Or that means you don't trust yourself that this is correct or right. Because if you're willing to hide it, that means that you know deep down somewhere inside that is probably wrong. You need to change those behaviors. See, the same way that I say I don't have enemies is because you need to try harder if you think you're my enemy, because I don't perceive myself as having any enemies. An enemy is someone who actually can affect your day-to-day. And I don't have anybody that can do that. So why am I worried about how people perceive me or feel about me? Like, they don't change my day-to-day. They're not going to change my paycheck. They're not going to change what I do tomorrow, my sleep. So screw them. Now, if I'm with somebody romantically and it's more than just like the trial phase, and I have yet to give them access to my software. Why? What am I hiding? So I think the thing that got me through the last big maturity growth milestone in terms of my relationships has been that idea of complete openness. Complete openness. Like, I shouldn't be sitting on any information after dating someone for 10 years. At this point, there shouldn't be any new stories. It's all old hat at this point, because I think true transparency is the big thing. Not a good old college try of, I showed you a few things. I told you about that one time I peed my pants in school, and you gave one terrible anecdote from your childhood, and now you think that other person knows you. They don't.
It's like what you said last time, fair weather friends.
Oh, screw them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're here when I'm the best, you should be here when I'm at worst.
Anyone can hold the helm while the seas are calm. Don't care. Don't care.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
That was good.
That was great.
Oh, yeah.